introduce myself. My name is Caroline Berlin. I'm an Assistant Dean of Admission at Bates College. And my role here today is just to pitch a few questions to our alumni panelists first. But of course, we'd really like to answer y'all's questions as well. So I will also be moderating the Q&A function. So throughout this next 45 minutes to an hour, feel free to pop in any questions and we'll try to get to those. I'll either mark them as answer live or try to chat something up quickly and post as an answer. So thank you for your patience there. So with that being said, I'd love to introduce our panelists. If you two wouldn't mind introducing yourselves to the audience, what year you graduated Bates, if you wouldn't mind sharing your major, minors, any major activities you did in college, maybe that you think really characterized your time at Bates, and then finally, what you're doing now. So sorry, that was kind of a laundry list there, but again, graduation, what you did at Bates and what you're doing now. Grishma, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Grishma Pradhan. I graduated from Bates in 2009. I was an economics major. I was involved in a few different things at Bates. Some of the most memorable experiences, I would say, was that I was on the committee on committees, which kind of placed students on the committees, on student government committees throughout campus. I was also a Bates Fund caller, where we solicited donations for the Bates Fund. That was an awesome experience, the College of Advancement. And I was also in the Asian Club at Bates. I'm not sure if it's the same name, but back then it was Sangay Asia. And currently I am legislative counsel for Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado. Caroline, you are on mute.
You think I would get the hang of it by now, but truly every day it's a new learning curve. So I will kick it to you, Rokya. Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Rokya. I am from Harlem. I graduated from Bates in 2015, so exactly 5 years ago. While I was at Bates, I was a politics and African American studies double major. And I did a variety of different things that have now all in some way, shape, or form found their way into my life post Bates. So I played squash for like a year. Realized college athletics were not for me, did not continue with that, and then proceeded to then do things like dance. I did quite a bit of at Bates. I wasn't a dance major or minor, but I just performed in a lot of the pieces and shows and did dance classes. I also worked heavily in admissions as both a tour guide, but I also helped to support Prologue. So I was definitely that person sitting in Commons, talking to people to let them host prospective students and then welcoming prospective students onto campus, which was really a nice full circle thing because I was also a Prologue student. And then what else? Oh, and I did a Bobcat Ventures, which was, so the year of my senior year, I kind of kickstarted Bobcat Ventures off, which was an entrepreneurial pitch competition. I got approached by a senior and he was like, hey, do you want to try to do this thing? And found some other people who also wanted to do this thing and we did it. And it's been able to still thrive, which has been really great to see in post-grad. So, and now what I'm doing is I work as both, so two things. I'm a working artist, so I direct and produce films and content, but I also am a youth leader. So I've been working at a variety of different youth organizations. And recently I'll be starting work at Harlem Children's Zone, which is a really big youth organization based in Harlem. So I'm very much coming back home, which is really nice. Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Excellent, thank you. And I see that Marshall is joining us. I think we had a few technical issues on the back end, so thank you for your patience, everyone. Hi, Marshall. We were just doing some brief introductions. Sorry to throw you straight into it, but if you don't mind sharing what year you graduated, what you studied, and maybe any major activities that characterize your time at Bates and what you do now.
Sure. Marshall Hatch Jr. graduated 2010, majored in political science, minored in religious studies. Played basketball all 4 years. Was the captain my senior year. And now I'm the executive director and co-founder of my own nonprofit in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. So that is our panel today. So again, folks, please feel free to pop in your Q&A or questions primarily. But to get us started, let's, I guess, start at the beginning. I'd love to hear about y'all's college search process. How did you even hear about Bates and what drew you to it? I know especially this fall, a lot of folks are not maybe necessarily, the college search looks a little different from what they anticipated. Many folks can't visit right now. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing what your process was like and advice for how to be flexible now. I feel free to, just feel free to put yourself off mute if you want to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was a part of an after-school program called Street Squash. It's based in Harlem. They have squash programs all over the country. And so we did a lot of like early college prep from the time I was like in 9th grade. So, and then of course it intensified by the time I got to 11th and 12th grade. But Bates was kind of one of those schools that got floated around because it was a squash school in the sense that they had squash, they played D1, it was pretty known for its squash. And also we had the former coach who's no longer there, but was there for quite some time, Pat Kosker. He used to work at Street Squash. So it was just like a lot of connectivity. And even at that point, when I was doing my list, Bates hadn't really gotten on yet. It was really two things happened. One, I had one college advisor who's like, you need to maybe add some more schools because I wasn't applying to that many schools. And so I was like, okay, let me look into Bates a little bit more. And it kind of all happened very quickly where it was like, I said I was going to look into Bates more. Somebody was like, apply to Prologue now. And so I applied to Prologue right then and there. The following week, Leah Weisenberger came to Street Squash to like actually give us a talk. And it just like, and so I mentioned that I had applied to Prologue, was looking forward to it, got in, and then like, it just like came to campus and just felt so at home very quickly. And was just kind of, I was a little surprised by it. I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting to feel so comfortable here so soon. And pretty much once I left, I just kind of kept thinking about Bates. I just kept coming back to Bates. So I still wanted to keep my options open. So I applied regular decision, got in, and then attended like a kind of an admitted students reception in New York. And then just from there, it was just like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going. So submitted my deposit and showed up on campus in August.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's interesting the twists and turns your search will take. I think we tell students all the time they're growing and changing, and that even happens senior year. Your process is going to grow and change as well. So my advice is always stay flexible, and yeah, don't be afraid to check out that one last school. So yeah, that's how you kind of came to Bates. I'd love to chat about your adjustment to Bates though. So I'd love to hear from any three of you if you have thoughts. What was adjusting to Bates like, especially if it was very different from your high school experience? How did you get to know people and get plugged in?
I can take that one. I came from Fulton, Missouri. I'm mostly from Fulton, Missouri. I've lived in many different places. I'm originally from Nepal, but lived in a lot of different places in the US and then spent middle school and high school in Missouri. And so it was, I came from a very small high school in Missouri. And I kind of knew that I wanted to go to a small school. And that's why, it's one of the reasons I ended up going to Bates. But I think that there is a lot of anxiety and eagerness, anticipation about what, your first year of college will be like, going to a place, especially a place like Maine, right? And we weren't going to be in some large metropolitan area, right? But I think that I think that the school did a really good job in making a sense of community early on. I participated in what was the ASOP program. I'm not sure if you all still have that program. You do? Okay, great. So, it was a program where, people, first years were split up into several different groups depending on what your interests were. I did a community service driven ASOP program where I met with about 9, I think it was, individuals, other first years who were interested in kind of the same thing, right? And we went camping for a few days before school started. And so that was a great way to just meet other first years before actually kind of diving headfirst into the entire class. And so you already kind of had individuals you connected with and then kind of moved from there. So I thought that was a really wonderful program.
I guess I'll chime in and answer that too. Go ahead, Carolyn.
No, go ahead. I'd love to hear your answer.
No, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm from Chicago, and I went to Lincoln Park High School in Chicago, which is a huge public high school, about 2,500 plus students. And so I kind of knew I wanted a small school experience too for college. And I ended up coming, I think it was Prologue. I think it was, it was Prologue, and got a chance to just meet with kids from Philly, New York, and really all across the country. And that's what really drew me to Bates. My father was also very influential in helping me make my decision, particularly the legacy of Benjamin Elijah Mays, who I believe graduated in 1920. And, when I first landed on campus, I remember walking through the bookstore and picking up his autobiography, Born to Rebel, and just reading through it and kind of seeing myself in his story. And that kind of flavored my experience at Bates all 4 years. And so really carving out a space and a home for students of color, particularly African Americans. And I remember, I think it was my sophomore year, we protested. We protested the admissions office because we felt that we needed more students of color reflected in the student class. And that was also an influential experience. It kind of forged all of the Black and brown students, as well as, a lot of our allies on campus together. And I think it further enriched my college experience early on.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Oh, yes. Excellent.
I just want to say that I feel like I was a product of those protests because I've spoken to a lot of students of color who graduated in the years previous, because you graduated as soon as I came in. I came in 2011. And I remember there was a lot of conversation on campus, pretty much all my 4 years, about the classes that came before that kind of really did a lot of that footwork to kind of say like, we need to do better here.
Yeah.
And I just know it just grew in the years following. So from my class, it was like one class that was kind of like shaky. And then after that, it was just pretty good to do that.
No, I appreciate you saying that, because we kind of stood on the shoulders of the upperclassmen. And when I was there too, my freshman and sophomore year, they were doing a lot of the activism, even when, the admissions office wasn't really paying attention. And so to see that continuum was a beautiful thing.
Thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you all for sharing. I think there's so many pieces of the Bates experience and traditions that kind of tie class years together like that. I'm not sure if it's like you have the traditions of the senior class picking speakers for commencement for the incoming freshman class, the thesis binding, ASOP, all of those are kind of built in ways that you start getting to know upper class students and realizing that they're your resources and they're your community members. Absolutely. So that's a bit about adjusting to Bates. Let's chat a bit about academics. I know you shared your majors. What was that like? How did you pick your major? What was advising like for you at Bates as well, relationship with faculty members?
I can start on that one. I had a lot of back and forth when picking my major. I had a wonderful advisor my freshman year, or my first year at Bates, Dennis Grafflin. I'm not sure if he's still there, but we had this seminar program where your advisor for first year was the professor for that particular class. And it was, a small class, and it was kind of like an introduction to Bates type of thing. And then you could pick, a different advisor once you picked your major, right? Because obviously it takes some people some time. I picked econ because my dad teaches econ, and so he kind of pointed me in that direction. I was always a little bit more politics oriented. And so it's funny because now I work in politics, but I spent 4 years at Bates doing econ, and I never really used my econ degree directly, right, in any of my work. I went to law school pretty much soon after I graduated. But I know that, and when I talk about Bates, I never forget to mention that the professors at Bates are incredible, absolutely incredible. And I think they really made my experience at Bates. I mean, there were a lot of great things about Bates, but my professors were absolutely amazing, very dedicated individuals who had been around for a really long time and really invested in their students, right? It's a small enough school where they have a lot of time for you. They have a bunch of office hours for you. They are available via email. You can call them whenever you want and just talk. And I think that was the highlight. That was one of my highlights at Bates.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that. The first word that came to mind when you started talking about like the faculty and professors was that they were like really accessible, just because a lot of them lived in Lewiston. And even if they didn't live in Lewiston, they were like in Portland. But because like the school is so small, it's like you figure in your class sizes. I've been in classes where there were no more than 6 students. And I remember distinctively in that particular class, which was narrating slavery taught by Sue Houchins, we like would meet in her house and like drink tea and talk about all these like slave narratives, which was really interesting, like dichotomy, but it was really, really dope. And it played a huge role in my decisions major wise, because I had initially come into Bates thinking, I always knew I was going to double major, but I thought I was going to do like politics and like psychology or something like that, or maybe sociology, and then just kind of fell into African American studies. I think the first class that I took in that realm was, I think it was White Redemption, which was a film class, which again, that full circle, because when I came into Bates, I didn't think I was going into any type of film or media work at all. So again, that full circle moment of like, it maybe started there, where it was like, we spent this class just talking and engaging in films and how they depicted race and gender and sexuality. And so that then kind of transitioned, and I just kept taking classes that by the time my sophomore year came around, I was like, I think I'm just gonna like major in this. And a lot of my decision around it was also because I was just like, I'm excited to write this thesis. So thesis, I think is still a thing at Bates, right? Yes, okay, cool. So thesis is a really big deal. It makes up a huge part of your senior year experience, whether you decide to do like a semester long one or a year long one or 2, as I did, which I don't know if I recommend. But I did it and I graduated. But yeah, I just remember really being excited to like explore different ideas. And something else that I really took advantage of while I was at Bates, which I highly recommend for anybody's independent studies, I was really big. Once I realized I can make my own class and just find a professor to support me, I was like, oh, we're doing this every semester. So, because I'm very self-guided and independent in that way, and I take initiative. So I was just like, I need a little more flexibility as to what I can study. And that was great. It's a great opportunity to like really dive deep into topics that you're interested in, which I feel like was not an experience I had ever had in education before. I remember growing up really resenting going to school just because it just felt like I was constantly doing things that had no importance in my life, really didn't matter. I had a lot, and I was very critical. I remember explicitly having an argument with my trigonometry teacher, which I don't recommend, but saying like, you know, why does this matter? Please explain to me why invisible numbers matter when I'm telling you that for me personally, I'm not going into any type of mathematics. I'm not going into any engineering. I need you to bring this down, bring this more tangible. And she was really affronted by it, and she couldn't explain it. And so I was just like, I'm over that. So it was really refreshing to be in a space where it was like what I cared about and what I wanted to learn about mattered. And I feel like it really restored my faith in like education and learning and being a lifelong learner. So yeah.
Definitely resonates. It's one of the beauties of going to a liberal arts school like Bates, right? Just the intellectual richness is everywhere, and you find the intersections, right? So definitely took White Redemption with Charles Nero, which was incredible. I may have taken like 4 or 5 women and gender studies courses just because of Sue Houchins. And I walked into Bates knowing that I wanted to do political science. I had aspirations for going to law school after, and so I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't expect taking on religious studies. And I took more Jewish history courses within that religious studies minor than I expected. And it was just because my intellectual curiosity was piqued every time I went to class, and the class size was so small, you know, you couldn't hide, right? So you had to do the readings, you had to prepare, you had to come to class willing to engage. But that's what made the entire experience just so incredible.
And then I'm just gonna add one more thing that would then take conversations outside of classrooms, right? Like that was kind of also my first time having that experience where the things that we were learning in class, we would talk about outside of class. Like it didn't stop. And I think that's the beauty also too of being at a small liberal arts school where everyone's living on campus. Those conversations are happening still all the time. And they're not all dark conversations either. They're like really intriguing, thoughtful. I feel like my mind just expanded so much by engaging with people who were different from me and who were thinking about things maybe a little bit differently, but then at the same time, we had core values that we all kind of aligned with, which is right, like all of us deserve equality, all of us deserve to be here. And there's so many things about the world that don't value that. So how do we do that? You know, so I feel like that was also really an enjoyable part of the experience too. Also, it was Sue Houchins who I would have that class with in her house. At this point, she was just like, I don't want to trek in the snow, so y'all could just meet me at my crib and I'll like have tea and cookies ready for you.
It's good to have flexible professors. Thank you all for sharing. That was a really rich conversation. I'd like to, I did have one quick clarifying question from a student. So just to address that, does your advisor change every year? So the structure, as I think Grishma pointed out, yep, you come in your first year with a first year advisor who teaches that first writing course. And they advise you in academic matters up until you declare your major. You're required to declare your major by the spring of your sophomore year. So that gives you a full year and a half. And honestly, plenty of people still switch around after that. But your major advisor could be an additional or new professor or the same professor. It just probably depends. Most people pick a new professor just given departments. But in any case, you can still connect with your first year advisor. It's kind of up to you. If you've, really forged a great bond, go ahead. So then you have your major advisor, and then the final academic advisor you might get, catch them all, I guess, is your thesis advisor, who you will pick for your thesis, one for each of them if you're doing two. And again, that could be your major advisor, but it's typically someone new, as you kind of, again, narrow into your area of expertise. So you can have up to 3 different advisors, hypothetically could be the same person, and you can continue to connect with them throughout your entire time at Bates. It's kind of up to you. So thank you, Lisa, for that question. Before we jump into y'all's question, I do want to ask one more thing. Since you are alumni, normally I interview students all the time, so I never get to ask this. How did Bates prepare you for life after college? Whether that is career services or just the skills you learned here, how did that translate? A big question, I know.
I guess I can start. There are many ways in which I feel like Bates prepared me for life after college, but I think the biggest one was just engaging with difference. I grew up, like I said, in Harlem, attended schools mostly in Harlem. So a lot of my community and a lot of my experience in school with peers was with Black and brown kids. We all spoke the same language. We came from the same places. And it was like we understood each other. So Bates was the first time where I was engaging with white students, but in particular, like international students. I think that was the thing that was unexpected by. Like I knew that Bates was pretty white, so I was already prepared to be engaging with a lot of white students, but I was really unprepared and surprised by how strong the international student community was. Even my roommate for all 4 years, funny enough, is Canadian, which is not that far, but like she was still coming with a very different perspective of the world than I was. And then the amount of African students that were on campus and Asian students, and just, it really helped to inform me, especially when I was doing like my schoolwork or thinking about the bigger questions. I felt like it really forced me to get out of the narrative of just what it means to be Black in America and really take that to like a global understanding of Blackness in the world, but also just like being a woman in the world. Like it just, and so I feel like for me, I'm really comfortable engaging with people who are different from me because of that reason. And it's still a really valuable skill. I forgot to mention that I'm actually in grad school right now. That at the New School in New York, it's doing a media studies program. And that program is also highly international. And I feel really at home just because it's like, this isn't my first time dealing with people who are not from here and what their experience is like. And it makes me like incredibly empathetic to everything that's been happening over the last few months. And also just empathetic to their journey, where it's like, you know, taking certain things for granted. The fact that I could go home during the holidays and you know, that's just what it is. Where it's like some people were staying on campus because it's like their home is miles away, hours away. They can't get there, so they have to like find people to like stay with over certain like brief holidays and things like that. So I feel like more than anything, that's where I got learned the most, or prepared me the most for life after Bates.
I can jump in. I think Bates prepared me how to think critically, how to question what you read, what you hear, question the assumptions. And so you mentioned you're in graduate school. I graduated from the University of Chicago, Divinity and School of Social Service Administration 3 years ago. And I just remember using those critical thinking tools that I learned at Bates while in class. And I think I would have felt a little intimidated had it not been for Bates. Like Bates really gave me, a certain sense of pride and confidence in being an intellectual and kind of growing into that space and owning it, right? And then it taught me grit as well, playing basketball for 4 years, as competitive as the NESCAC is. playing Bowdoin and Williams and Amherst and just like gearing up for those games and having a whole community support you for those events. And then just toughing out the tough times at Bates. And, that's what life, I think, is about, just grinding through those tough moments, learning from them, and then growing. And I think Bates was extremely instrumental in that regard.
Yeah, just to echo both of you. The experiences, right? The diversity and experiences that it brought to me. I grew up in a really rural place in Missouri, and actually interacting with other Asians and meeting other Black students and international students, like you all said. It was incredibly eye-opening. I also took White Redemption, and I just remember my mind being blown, and just being shocked that I had never seen or heard about any of this before, right? Or ever thought about it. And I had been absorbing all of this information since I was a little kid. Was really hard and heartbreaking, and again, eye-opening. I think that academically, the courses at Bates were just incredibly diverse, right? I remember taking a Russian studies course where we just read Russian literature, and I knew nothing about the history of Russia before taking that class, and just another incredibly eye-opening experience. So yeah, just being exposed to all of those different things via my peers and my professors was incredibly instrumental in interacting with individuals after graduating.
Thank you for sharing. Excellent. So we will dive into some of the questions from students we've gotten, and I'll just kind of go in order in which we received them. This one's a bit more philosophical, but I really like it. What was the most important value that you learned through your Bates experience?
Maybe I'll try. I hope I can articulate it. I think that I grew up with parents who were very kind of strict and, a little overbearing, and kind of wanted me to have, kind of ambition was everything to them and to my culture, right? I had to have a plan, and kind of every step, everything that I did was working towards that plan. And when I got to Bates, I met individuals who thought about life in a completely different way. It wasn't about just being successful, right? It was about helping people, for example. It was about, I don't know, it was just like a holistic approach to life, which I had never grasped before and never been exposed to before. And I think that actually changed my entire trajectory. I came to Bates wanting to be a lawyer, wanting to go into law school. But, after, while at Bates, I kind of decided that there was a lot more to life than just kind of, that kind of stature of like, oh, saying you're a lawyer. It was about, for me, what I discovered while at Bates was that I really loved advocating for people. And so, after law school, I went into public interest law, and have been there ever since. And so I think that that's the most valuable thing that Bates taught me is like, people are so good there that you know what I mean? I mean, that's what I felt like. They were just, it wasn't, individuals just all wanting to go to New York and work in finance, right? Which is, there's nothing wrong with that, right, at all. But there was, again, a variety of thoughts and opinions and ideals about, contributing to society, which was wonderful.
gonna jump in and say that the most valuable thing that Bates, that I learned through Bates was just that everybody's human. Literally everybody's human. Like we're all, no matter if you're rich, poor, Black, white, Asian, from another country, from here, it's just like we are all human and we're all more or less struggling with the same kind of questions and conflicts, and it's really helped to inform my art, I think, because I feel like that's a lot of what grounds me, is like we're all suffering through battles that we can't really see. And it's really taught me how to be very mindful and critical of my judgments of people, of the world, of like things that I consume, and that kindness is key and kindness is possible. There are a lot more good people outside in the world really trying to do their best to be kind and good to other people, even if it's misguided, even if it's not always the best, or rather like with the best outcome, because I think the intentions are there, but the best outcome sometimes doesn't really happen. So it's very much restored a lot of my faith in humans, I must say, because so many of the people that I'm still close to, so much of my community still to this day are other Batesies. Like I just did a short film, I just wrapped a short film on Saturday where the lead actress was another Batesie who came to New York, did her acting conservatory, wrote this script and was like, can you direct this? And I was like, I'll give it a shot, you know? And I then pulled in another Batesie who like has been doing a camera work in New York City. She then pulled in another Batesie who came out and helped us PA, and we all knew each other through dance, funny enough, at Bates. So it was like, we all kind of got back into this very like, this banter and this enjoyment, and it's, yeah, so there, and like all of us are aligned in the same ways in terms of who we want to be as people, creatives, professionals. And at the core of it, it's just like doing good. Do less harm, do more good, and use yourself that way. So be of service to others. So, yeah.
Definitely concur with all that's been said. I think Ben Mays, I mean, to answer the question directly about, a philosophical approach, what did you learn at Bates? I think he said about his experience at Bates, my education did not emancipate me. It did the far greater service of allowing me to emancipate myself, right? To prove to myself my own dignity, my own worth. And so what that means to me is Bates's interdisciplinary approach really forces you to answer that age-old question, what is my life? What's worth doing? What's worth committing my life to, right? And you're forced to do that because there's so much latitude in terms of what you can study, what you should pursue. You really have to look in the mirror every day. And I think, your comments about social justice really arises out of that self-examination that the Bates curriculum forces you to do. And so my senior thesis was a result of that process. It was about felon disenfranchisement. And I think John Boffman was my advisor. He was an incredible advisor. And of course, that forced me to think more critically about the history of America and challenge all of the myths that we tell ourselves about who we are as a country, right? And then focus in on and zero in on this topic of felon disenfranchisement as really the new Jim Crow. And I did that study well before Michelle Alexander's book, right? And so I'm gonna use that word again. It was just so rich in that way because it forced you to really challenge yourself in those critical ways.
This has been exactly what I need to get through the rest of October, guys. This has been really heartwarming and refreshing. I appreciate your openness. I'm going to hit another student question. Hannah wants to know, can any of you alumni speak on Bates' progression to make safe spaces for POC and widen the community? What has Bates done to address the concerns of POC on campus? And I can give maybe a more recent update, but I'd love to hear y'all's perspective. I know we've already had a conversation on us about the linear experience you've had, but. I can kick off with some of the more recent things that have been happening. So I guess I'll back it up to the summer. Over the summer, obviously, yeah, America was facing some big issues. In particular, the murder of George Floyd, I think, definitely reopened some wounds and opened the eyes of some people. It started a larger national conversation about not just police brutality, but obviously systemic racism, white supremacy, and how that's embedded in our institutions. And so we received tons of feedback from alumni, from students, from faculty and staff, kind of saying, we've talked about all of these topics before, but there's a special urgency now. What is Bates going to do? What is going to change? So over the summer, Clayton Spencer sent out a kind of long letter really reaffirming Bates' inherent values in the equality of all people and the right to an education and the right to an equal education at Bates. And what it's going to take to address that. So reaffirming that value and then also calling on every department in Bates, staff and faculty, to first start with a racial equity audit to start to dig deep into their policies, their practices, how they hire, how they retain staff, how they interact with students. And as we kind of conglomerate that information, we're making next steps, each department. There's also kind of an overarching board. Bates brought on our VP of Equity and Inclusion, Dr. Noelle Chaddick, over a year ago now, and they've also been really instrumental in these efforts. They have kind of really transformed the conversations that we're having. There continues to be more opportunities for training. And then also, I think so much of what is happening is also so driven by the students. Both Rokya and Marshall talked about their activism at Bates, and yeah, that's key to driving an institution. Obviously, there's a perfect world, right? But the students, their energy, their passions, I think is important in directing this work as well. And it's important Bates listens to students. So students, they've also created a panel, they've created a student working group to work in conjunction with faculty and staff to really guide this conversation about racial equity audits and next steps. We've also really changed, I'm just kind of doing a laundry list now, but we've also really focused in on Bates on hiring and retaining and promoting and fully supporting faculty and staff of color. So that's also a large conversation many institutions are having. And we continue to have. So that's a little freshness of what's going on at Bates right now. I will drop a link, in the chat. Fortunately, I think Bates is doing a really good job of documenting all of these changes, but also really trying to more formally document all the really important work that has been happening up to now. Bates really needs to acknowledge that prior work that was key to where the conversations we can have now. And some of that work was done in spite of the administration, as with any institution. So they document that as well. And I will drop that link. Do you guys have any further thoughts on that before we get to the next question? Thank you.
Yeah, just to piggyback, I think you did a great job with that answer. And I think what I experienced was, in my experience at Bates, the seeds were kind of sown back then and even before I got there. And so, of course, it takes generations and generations of commitment, from an institutional level to kind of peel back the layers that currently exist. And I think Bates, the incredible job that it has done is really listening, as you mentioned, to the students and being flexible. Of course, you can't say the same thing about other colleges or universities. And so I think that's commendable. And then on top of all of that, I think moving forward, we can't underestimate the power of faculty POCs. Cannot at all. Like Charles Nero was a hero. Marcus Bruce was a hero. Sue Houchins a hero. And even, non-POCs, Anna Bartell was a hero. Dean Reese was a hero. For me and my best friend, Jonathan Dowdy, who's also from Chicago, he graduated a year before me. For us, getting a haircut in Maine was a task. and it was Dean Reese and his office who helped us get the transportation we needed every 2 weeks to go get it. Like, that was important for us. That was a huge thing for us, And so instances like that really made my personal experience bearable on the front end. Like, my freshman year was pretty tough. And then the more and more Bates listened, you actually saw the representation of Black and brown folk and international students increase year after year after year. And so you really were comforted. Like, by the time I graduated, I was so proud of Bates. I ended up working for Bates in the admission office. That was my first job. And I had no issue just talking about my experience authentically and really trying to convince students to consider Bates, because it was, by the end of it, it was a miracle, I think.
I'll add to that, because as I said earlier, right, a lot of that work that Marshall and his class did was really, in the classes before that even, really, I think, helped to support my experience when I came into Bates. While I knew the school was still very white and very wealthy, I did not feel alone. There was never a moment that I felt like I was the only Black girl all the time. Especially if you think about, right, we have one dining hall. So it's very easy to feel that way very quickly. And I even remember having alumni, because that's something that was always very interesting too, is alumni of color never really left. They were always kind of around. They would either come back up for campus. Some of them would work for the campus. Some of it was because, some of them had personal relationships with folks. So you always saw older student alumni of color, and they were really clear about no, y'all have a good, I hope y'all know y'all have a good, and just keep pushing, keep bringing up the problems, keep talking to the institution, because they are listening. Because I think the really interesting thing about Bates, and I know they some people feel sometimes somewhat conflicted about our history, right? But we were started by abolitionists. They never did any type of discrimination. So I feel for Bates, it's just a really hard ideal to live up to when you're in a very small, very white state like Maine, because I actually remember being a tour guide and having a guidance counselor ask me how do I get Black and brown kids from the Bronx to come to a school in the middle of Maine? Please tell me. And I couldn't really give her an answer, because I was I don't know, tell them I'm here. I don't know. So I think there are a lot of the challenges are some of it's internal as an institution in terms of just being more aware of itself. But I think some of it is also external in terms of there are real challenges. You have to be able to provide aid to those students that you're coming here and being able to support them all 4 years if they're not coming from wealthy backgrounds. And so there are a lot of things at the school, but I do believe the school really tries really, really hard. I think that's always something that I've given credit to. It tries really, really hard to create that safe space for students of color, to make sure that they feel supported, to make sure that they're not feeling like they're the only ones walking around and not seeing themselves. I remember when I graduated, one of the classes that came in after me was it was a big deal on campus because it was like 22 Black men in that class alone. And everybody was just like, what? Like, how we got here? Like, it was just so much conversation amongst the students of color about that. And I know that that's not a lot, right? Like when we think about the grand scheme of things, of how big the school is, but it was like a big deal, and like, there is progress being made on trying to make sure that this is a viable space for people who are not white and not wealthy to come and feel safe and comfortable and thrive. And I do feel like I've been able to thrive because of the school. So yeah.
Thank you. I know we're a little short on time, folks, so we'll do one more question. So Andrew wanted to know, to what extent do Bates alumni help recent Bates graduates enter the workforce, and how? Before I kick it to our panelists, I know I can speak to a few pieces. First, students at Bates come up to 3 times a year, can shadow an alum for a day or a weekend to see what they do. Typically every year, there's also every summer, about 10% of students will be doing an internship with an alum or a company that an alum works at. So there's a robust network that way. So there's those kind of superficial channels through the Center for Purposeful Work, but I would love to hear from you 3. Yeah, did you network it with any Bates alums? Or honestly, also I know a big piece of adjusting to your adult life is social as well. So did you plug into any alumni networks when you moved to a brand new city?
Yeah, I definitely did that. I think the career services was instrumental in my getting my first job, actually. I even, and this was, years out after I graduated from law school, I still reached back out to my Bates Career Services counselor, who was still there at the time, and just asked, I think she was, yeah, just asked her to kind of connect me with other Bates alums in the area when I had just moved to DC, and she did that. And I talked to a bunch of Bates alums, and everyone was really open and willing to speak with me. I think that networking is a great way to kick things off, right? It's very important. It's a good skill to have, to be able to speak with people. And my experience with all of the alums I spoke with was that they were all responsive and wanted to help in any way. So that was great.
I know for myself, I feel like I can speak more about my experience because I feel like I didn't necessarily take as much advantage of reaching out to alumni while I was like post-grad. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I really didn't know what I was supposed to be doing when I graduated. I had gotten all this like information, knew what I loved and was passionate about, but was still very much trying to figure out where I belonged. And how I was pretty much going to use the education for my professional life. So, but I know I've made myself available in that way, and particularly in a lot of informal settings. So going to like the Bates alumni out and engaging with with graduates who just graduated, and what really interesting too is like, because a lot of alums tend to go to like there are pockets of where there are quite a few of us. So New York is being one of those places. And so what tends to happen is that like, I'll go to an event that a friend of mine from Bates is hosting and then run into like another set of Bateses who are maybe younger or like all varied classes. That's happened on more than like enough occasions where it's just like you just kind of pop up and then you see people. And I know I've personally done my part to really make sure that I make myself available, and like you need to talk or like reach out to anybody, or if you're interested, particularly if you're interested in like creative field or media content creation, because that entire industry works on like networking. You get your projects based on like, and it's not even like a who you know in the sense of like working up. It's a lot of working sideways and finding people like, yo, can you come crew on my like short and I'll come and help you out on something that you're doing. And so I've really done my part to make sure that like I'm plugging people in, and it's worked out on a few occasions. Funny enough, there's a student who got, I think she was like 2 or 3 years younger than me. And like I saw her at one of these informal settings, and she was like, I want to maybe do media. And I was like, all right, cool, give me your number. And I had a friend of mine who was looking for a PA, and I just like sent her contact and didn't know what came of it, but then watched my friends, because it was a web series, and saw in the credits that she was there. And I was just like, oh my God, I didn't even know that actually worked out. So it's things like that, right? Like, so really take advantage of like, especially when you graduate, like finding the community wherever it is. I know they do Bates Night, like what is it called? Bates Night in the City, Bates City in the night, something like that. Like just do your best to go to those things, and then like really rely on those communities and find the people, the Batesies, because that kindness and that warmth doesn't leave people just because they left like campus. It really does carry.
Yeah, just to add very quickly, we had a phrase all 4 years playing basketball at Bates, Bobcat pride, right? And I felt that pride after I graduated. Coach John Furbush did an incredible job of keeping alumni kind of in the loop about the happenings on campus, and making sure that, those interpersonal relationships were forged, so that, if one needed a job, that was a simple phone call. But it wasn't just basketball, it was really across the campus. I remember, developing a very sincere relationship with Bill Hiss, who was just a major force at Bates, and the admissions office in particular. And my sophomore year, the summer of my sophomore year, he had connected me with an alum who lived in DC, who was an attorney, and I was able to go down for a couple of days and kind of pick her brain about what her process was. And then that relationship led to an internship the following summer with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and also in DC at GW, George Washington. And as I mentioned before, my first job was at Bates, and shout out to Lee Weisenberger for kind of helping, Lee Weisenberger Albert, for kind of helping facilitate that. And so the networks are so strong, and the community is so small. And so I feel the same way. Chicago, I know I can count 15 to 20 off the top of my head of Batesies that are in Chicago doing big things and always willing to help.
Excellent. Thank you, three, for your stories and perspectives. I see that we're out of time here. I think we got to most questions. But students, if you have any kind of further questions, absolutely, please feel free to reach out to your regional representative. You can also ask a student anything. You can find those students on our website. So if you have questions about specific majors, activities, etc., feel free to get in touch with our students. And finally, I just really thank you so much, the three of you. This has been such a pleasure. This has been really the highlight of my day. You guys just shared so much. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And yeah, enjoy the rest of evening, day, wherever you are.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate you, Caroline.